The Florida Panthers shocked the world with their first-round series upset against the President's Trophy-winning Boston Bruins, the team that set an NHL record this season. Then they go on to beat the Toronto Maple Leafs 4-1 in that series. Can they keep the magic alive in Round 3 against the Carolina Hurricanes? Welcome back to Edgework here on the Hammer Betting Network, part of our NHL playoff series preview videos. We're whittling down closer and closer to the Stanley Cup Finals now, so looking at the third round matchups, and we're starting here today with the Eastern Conference matchup, the one everyone expected, right? The Florida Panthers taking on the Carolina Hurricanes to determine who moves on to the Stanley Cup. And as we look at these odds here today, we will be referencing Pinnacle. Pinnacle is the world's sharpest sports book, available to bettors in Ontario. You can find out what professional bettors have known for decades. Pinnacle is where the best bettors play. You must be 19 plus in Ontario. Please play responsibly. Not available in the US, but make sure you're checking out Pinnacle for all of your sports betting needs, whether it is here on the NHL playoff previews or you're looking for other markets. Pinnacle will have it, and they are the sharpest book for that. So thank you to Pinnacle for sponsoring these. But so, Money, we're going to start with you here, looking at series prices for this one, and we will pull the Pinnacle odds for this. Carolina currently sitting at minus 127 to win this series. Florida at plus 110. This is an implied probability of 55.9% for Carolina to win. When you saw the opening prices on these, you see where it's currently sitting at right now. Was this where you were expecting? Did you think Carolina might be a little bit more of a favorite? Like, what was your thoughts on the opening odds and where we sit right now in this series price?
Yeah, I did feel that Carolina opened a bit short. I think that there is still some value on them, especially if Teravainen is coming back in this series, which it looks like he will. So I do think that Carolina opened a bit short here.
How much of this has to play into the fact that, like, hey, Carolina has some injuries out, and then what we've seen of Bobrovsky in the past round against the Maple Leafs with how well that he played, carrying that on. I mean, you look at Florida, they're not necessarily a team that overwhelms you based off of their roster, but the fact that Bobrovsky did play that way. Now you look over to Carolina, they've had some goalie rotation through there. There is some questions and uncertainty with that. How much of that do you think factors into the price just based off of maybe a little bit of the recency bias that we've even seen out of what Florida got from their goaltending?
Yeah, I think a lot of it has to play into that. Florida, they beat the best regular season team in NHL history, right? Then they beat the Leafs, right? Those kind of things stand out. Whereas Carolina, they're not your sexy team. They haven't been, but over the last few years with this core, they just do the things that they need to do, and they're able to get wins. So I think there's and with Bobrovsky as well, he's become a story too. So I think that a lot of that does play into keeping that line short, and yeah, and I do think that Carolina does have the value there still.
Alex, I'm kind of interested in the matchup of these two teams and how they go head-to-head, how the series potentially could play out. Now, obviously, Florida's shocked people a little bit based on what they did in round one against Boston, then going on and defeating the Leafs 4-1 in that series. This Florida team, though, one thing that I think people kind of dismissed maybe a little bit is that they played playoff hockey for the last month and a half in the season, and that was just to get to the playoffs. So at least from that mentality standpoint, every night for them essentially felt like do or die, so that prepped them to get in there. That being said, in terms of the overall team makeup and how they're going to compare here against Carolina, I don't think their defense is as good. I don't necessarily think that their depth in terms of their forwards, maybe down to the third and the fourth line, matches up as well as maybe Carolina, especially if they have an opportunity to get Teravainen back here. We see that he's practicing now, taking off the non-contact jersey. In your opinion, where do you kind of see this matchup going? Is there spots where Carolina can really take advantage of this against Florida in terms of how these two teams shake out?
Yeah, I think that the big thing we'll notice here is Carolina's forecheck is just relentless. And obviously Florida plays that same style, but I think the blue line, the difference in the skill on these blue lines, where Florida's blue line is maybe the worst one left in the playoffs, might have even been the worst one in the playoffs altogether coming in. And, now we're going to have that Carolina forecheck going up against them. I'm not sure how they're going to be able to handle that. And that could be what kind of swings this series, so to speak. Whereas, we've seen Florida play with that very aggressive forecheck, and it worked very well for them. But Carolina's blue line is maybe the best in this entire playoffs. And I think they're a lot more equipped to handle that than, say, the Leafs were. I think Boston altogether did a pretty good job handling it, but just Ullmark playing injured, things kind of went south for them, more so in that regard. It wasn't necessarily that they were outplayed by Florida or dominated in that series. I think, Boston obviously was a better team in a lot of those games, just goaltending kind of let them down. So, yeah, I think that, Carolina's blue line, the edge there is going to be significant here. And, just the way they're so structured, right? And this is like a Carolina team that's maybe the most structured team in the league. And obviously, their underlying metrics throughout the season and even the playoffs kind of speak towards that and how little they give up to their opponents in terms of shots and how much they're able to create compared to a Florida team that's maybe the least structured. And they're just kind of fly by the seat of your pants. And they've always been that way. Maurice has always kind of been that way as a coach. And, I think that's going to, it's kind of helped get them to where they are, where they're able to play a little bit loose and they don't really have to follow the same structure. They can, fly forward, get after teams. I don't think that's necessarily going to work for them against Carolina. They're going to have to adopt a bit more of a game plan and a bit more structure in order to combat what Carolina likes to do. I'm not sure Paul Maurice is capable of that. All due respect to Paul Maurice, I've come on here and I've said some negative things about Paul Maurice throughout the course of this season. He has gone and led this team to the conference final. I've eaten my words a little bit. Definitely deserves more respect than I have given him up to this point. But the difference in Paul Maurice to Rod Brind'Amour, I think, is massive here. There's just a lot of things kind of working against Florida in this series. And obviously, Sergei Bobrovsky can be the guy that he is. If he can be the guy he's been throughout the first sort of like 1.5 rounds after he came in for line in the first round, then maybe Carolina's scoring kind of dries up like we've seen in past playoffs. And that's always a possibility. But the path to Florida actually winning this series seem a lot, there's a lot fewer of them than there is for Carolina to go win this series.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, it is kind of an interesting matchup here, too. You look at Paul Maurice. He coached Rod Brind'Amour when he was in the league, so seeing that match, those two go head-to-head is pretty interesting. Now, So Money, I think, one more thing before we get into our bets and our picks here, as well as how we look at our actual predictions for this series and how those shake out. I'm kind of interested your thoughts in how does this Florida team maybe handle a situation against a Carolina team that is very structured and not only that, but very disciplined under Rod Brind'Amour, where a lot of times they like to draw teams into taking penalties and suck them into that. We see in the second round, that was the least penalized series that we've seen so far in that one against the Leafs, and a Florida team that was one of the most penalized teams in the regular season so far this year. The NHL and their officiating has been extremely inconsistent, so we don't necessarily know how this is going to play out in the third round here. It could be power plays galore. It could be put the whistles away. We have no idea. But in terms of Florida's makeup and their mindset of that going up against Carolina, do you think in any type of way at all they might try to draw Carolina into this, or is it just going to be forget it? Like, we're just going to have to play throughout this?
Yeah, I think that Florida needs chaos. They need to make every game as chaotic as possible here for them to for them to have a chance. Alex touched on a lot of points there with even the coaching advantage, right? Like we just talked about it this morning with the Edmonton Vegas series, right? Like coaching matters, right? And there's a significant difference here between these two guys. So I think that it's going to be tough for Florida because Carolina is not the kind of team that's going to start running around. We saw that the Islanders tried to do that with Carolina in their series, and the Hurricanes just weren't having any of it, and the Islanders were the ones that ended up running around and taking penalties there, right? So New Jersey tried to make it chaotic too, and of course, that didn't work out either. So I think that fundamentally, Carolina is a very sound team. They have been for a few years now, and it just seems like it's coming together now. Like they've had tons of bad luck in the playoffs with this core. They finally have a path forward now, where I think that things are coming together for them. And I can't. When we talked about the Florida Boston series, we said that what is the path for Florida here, and I thought that the only way forward would be if Lion can't get it done, Bobrovsky comes in and he starts carrying them. When you're asking me the path here for Florida against Carolina, the only path I can see is if Carolina gets off their game and starts running around. And I really can't see a Rod the Bod team doing that.
Yeah.
Right. So, I think it's going to be really tough here for Florida to find a way.
All right, let's get to our best bets for this series, whether it be just total series, straight up who's going to win, series spreads, player props, whatever we're looking at in this one. Alex, go to you first. What is your favorite bet or something that you would be looking to play here in this series? What price would that be at? And why is it that you're looking in that direction?
So I do think that there's a lot of volatility in this series because I think that when you look at the goaltending for both teams with Bobrovsky and Freddie Anderson and kind of their wide range of outcomes, and maybe like the scoring that has kind of both teams have seen scoring dry up at different points throughout the season and in past years and stuff, right? So I think there's a lot of different ways that this could end quickly, this could go the distance, all that. So there's fun ways if you want to like play into that sort of volatility that you can look. But for me, I'm just going to keep it simple. And Carolina, minus 127 at Pinnacle to win the series. That's where I'm going here. I think it's just a little bit, I think we're getting a little bit of value there. And ultimately, I just think that the structure that this team has, and, somebody talked about it too, how they're just so unwilling to waver from it. They're so disciplined. Everyone knows their role. Everyone buys into this system, that complete team effort. I think it's just going to be a little bit too much for Florida to overcome in the end. I think we're getting a little bit of value there, and that's just the way I look. That's the way I'm betting into this one.
And so, Money, what's your favorite bet in this series so far?
So when I was first looking at this series, like when we first had the matchup, I actually thought it might be a long series. Like I do agree with Alex in the sense that there's a lot of volatility there, and because of that volatility, it's really tough to kind of think that a team can win in like four or five games. So I do like Carolina, but and this is nothing to take away from Florida, right? We saw that they beat a Boston team that it came out later how banged up they were, and Allmark was dealing with his injuries. Then they beat a Toronto team where, in hindsight, Toronto did not have a good playoff, right? Like we've talked about this ad nauseum, right? Like we know they struggled against Tampa Bay a lot. They did not have a strong playoff. So, and of the 8 wins that Florida has, 4 of them have been in overtime, right? Now, we have seen in the past, Alex's Habs won 10 overtime games in one playoff run, right? So it can happen, but when you're constantly winning these coin flip games, like at some point, it's really hard for me to think that you're going to be able to keep doing that, especially
Right.
against a team like Carolina, who, as we've touched on, they are a fundamentally sound team. So even though there is a path for this to be a longer series, I am going to stick with Carolina minus 1.5. It's plus 160 at Pinnacle. I think there's more chances for Carolina to finish this in 6 or fewer than there is for this to go 7.
Fair enough. Well, if you are looking around and you want to bet these bets that are given out here today on the show, we definitely recommend checking out Pinnacle, as Pinnacle will have the best prices on a lot of them. And if you watch The Daily Show, they've got the best price on whether it be sides, totals, spreads, puck lines, even player props. Pinnacle will have the best odds for those, but we're referencing them here today, not only because they are a presenting sponsor of the show, but they are a market maker in this. And a lot of the books do base things around where Pinnacle is sitting at. So we definitely recommend checking out Pinnacle Boat as well, making sure to line shop for any of these. So there you go. We're looking at minus 1.5, plus 160, as well as series price on this one, minus 127. And Alex, before we move off this quickly, what would you be willing to play that series price on Carolina to? Is this kind of right around your end point? Would you be looking to go much further? What are your thoughts on that?
So there's like some minus 130s and stuff too that are widely available. That's probably like, I wouldn't like to go much shorter than that. I would probably try and cap it around minus 130. And then, maybe, I mean, yeah, that's probably where I'd cap it. I would probably cap it at minus 130. You can get that widely available right now. So if you think it's going to move in that direction, we have seen money actually come in on Florida a little bit since openers. So we've seen, some books move towards the Panthers. So maybe you can wait and even get an even better price on Carolina. I don't think we're necessarily in danger of all the minus 130s or better being gone at any point before the series starts. So you should be able to get in at that price, anytime between now and puck drop in game one, in my opinion.
And so money on the minus 1.5 plus 160. Again, same question goes for you. Where would you be willing to play that price to?
I'd play it down to plus 145.
Okay. So there you go. You got a decent amount of wiggle room on that one as it stands right now with the minus 1.5. Now, guys, as we've done for each of the series previews that we did for the previous rounds, series predictions. So take the betting, put it aside, just straight up. Who's winning? How many games? So money will go to you first. What is your prediction for this series?
Oh, wide range of outcomes. Let's go with I'll go Carolina in 6.
Alex, go to you.
That's what I was gonna say. So I'll pivot here and I'll say Carolina in 7. Kotkaniemi scores the winner from Brent Burns. There you go.
From Brent Burns. Okay. I'm kind of glad you switched it up because we talked about the whole panel curse situation, whether you believe in that or not. It happened in the previous series predictions that we did. So I'm going Carolina in 6 here as well. So at least we didn't do the trifecta. I moved off that one. But yes, Carolina in 6 for me as well. If you enjoyed the show here today, you enjoyed the series breakdown, please make sure to subscribe here to the Edgework HQ YouTube channel. We will have one more coming for this third round, and then, of course, we'll have one big finale for the Stanley Cup finals. So make sure to subscribe so that you get notified every time these videos come out, as well as our daily picks and previews here on the Edgework Show every morning, 10:30 a.m. We will be altering it a little bit throughout the third round and the Cup finals, as there aren't games every single day, so can't give out bets on nights where there aren't any games, but you're not going to want to miss a show when it does happen. So subscribe here so you get notified as well. Let us know in the comments below. What are your thoughts on this series? How do you think this one is going to go? What are your predictions? Do you agree with us? Disagree with anything we said? Let us know in the comments below. And as well, make sure to check out the Hammer HQ YouTube channel, as we will have live NHL watch-alongs throughout the rest of the playoffs here, starting with the Game 7 Dallas-Seattle to close out the second round, but there will be more coming forward, so make sure you go and check out the Hammer HQ YouTube channel. To everyone who tuned in here today, we appreciate you taking the time. So Money, Alex, thank you guys so much for this. Enjoy round 3. We'll see you back here for the Stanley Cup Finals. Good luck on your bets.